Minute is rated R. The Rocky Horror Picture Show is also rated R. We're going to spend this time discussing the movie in gory detail, and along the road we will talk about some adult content and use some of our favorite swear words.
Carburetors, man. That's what life is all about.
Consider yourselves warned. Welcome to Rocky Horror Minute, the podcast where we break down the Rocky Horror Picture Show in excruciating detail, 1 minute at a time. I'm one of your hosts, Leandra.
And I'm your other host, Kelly.
And today we're joined by a very special guest, Jim O'Kane from the Rocketeer Minute. Hello, hello.
Hi, Leandra. Kelly, thanks for having me on. This is one of my favorite movies, or at least one of my most seen movies. So it's a lot of fun to talk about it.
Thank you so much.
So that actually segues nicely into the first bit we wanted to go into. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with Rocky, and if you remember the first time you saw the movie?
Yeah, I feel like, what was the Civil War like, Grandpa? It's I'm probably one of the few people you'll have on the show that actually was there at the beginning. I saw the original London show. Well, maybe not the original because I didn't see it with Richard O'Brien, but I saw it when it moved to the King's Road Cinema, and it was back in 1978. Yeah, I think the end of 1978 that I saw the actual play in the West End, and which was kind of funny because I was working at a movie theater in upstate New York, and we were showing Rocky Horror Fridays and Saturdays. So I was cleanup crew at like 2:30 in the morning to pick up all the newspapers and rice and playing cards that were scattered all over the.
Yeah, you poor soul.
Yeah, it was fun. I think I saw about at least 100 performances, probably like 110 or 20. But it was a lot of cleanup. But it was, it was raw and it was exciting. It was very different at the time, and it was, long before Mystery Science or anything like that. This was the first time you really talked back to the screen, and we had a lot of people. We were one of the few theaters in the area that showed Rocky Horror. I think the other theaters didn't want to have the cleanup things, but our manager, Mr. Kennedy, was very. He knew a way to make money. We would eventually wind up selling like Ziploc bags with rice in them, and we made kind of rudimentary kits for people to bring into the theater. But it was just a lot of fun. I can just remember the record store in the same strip mall that we were in started ordering a lot of copies of the album, and we're selling the album. I think we made a lot of sales for them because people weren't really buying. I mean, maybe the Star Wars album was about the only other soundtrack that was selling at the time. But it was quite a phenomenon back then. It's changed an awful lot since almost 45 years ago. But there's a lot of positive. I'm glad it's become part of our culture that everybody knows Rocky Horror. I mean, if you don't know Rocky Horror, it's kind of like, how can you not know Rocky Horror? But I went with my daughter, who lives in Austin. I went to a Alamo Draft House, and it was so, for lack of a better term, it's so programmed now. It's like it kind of defeats everything that it used to be. That you can't bring in anything from the outside, and they sell kits for I don't know, $10 or something like that of things and instructions on what to do when you're supposed to do it. So it's just like. But again, different generations do it different ways, and I guess that's part of the beauty of it. It becomes
that's also partly an Alamo Drafthouse thing. They curate the experience a little differently than most theaters do. From what I understand, they discourage a lot of callbacks.
Yeah.
That's not the typical Rocky experience now either. That's just sort of how Alamo Drafthouse rolls. But
did they have a cast there?
They didn't at the time. They did not have a cast in front of. Yeah, and it was just very. I mean, I am not a fan of Alamo Draft. I know some people enjoy that. I think of the woman at the end of all the Simpsons that goes shh at the end. It's to me that should be their logo, because it's like I grew up in a lot of small town theaters and a lot of what you call urban theaters where people are screaming, look behind you. There's, people, you're watching like a horror movie and just people are just shouting at the screen. And that to me, that's the reason that you go to the movies. I mean, if you don't want to do that, just stay home and sit on your couch and watch it in the living room. But it's just, you go, part of it is just the joy of being in an audience who's enjoying it with you. And
yeah, I would agree, especially for Rocky Horror, but even within reason for a lot of films, it greatly enriches the experience. Like I recently saw Tremors in a packed theater of 300, 400 people, and that completely transforms that movie experience. Everybody going nuts every time they get one of the worms and stuff. I mean, it was so much fun in a way that it's a great movie in general. But anyway, so I agree with you. And I feel like the Alamo Drafthouse is not the greatest fit for the traditional Rocky Horror experience, but I'm curious if you remember any of the really early callbacks.
Yeah, I mean, again, it was in New York, so it was very regional, and a lot of the stuff, it wouldn't even make sense nowadays. There's one where Janet is turning the channels on the closed circuit television, and she comes across Frankenfurter and Brad, and they're in bed together, and she's like, "Oh, Brad," And when you'd see that, there was a discount, kind of like a Walmart, regional Walmart called Two Guys, and they were in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, and their tagline on all their commercials was, "It's two guys, naturally," and somebody would yell that out, and everybody would laugh. But that would not make sense today because nobody knows what Two Guys was. It's like having a Walmart joke, or it's like telling Eisenhower jokes nowadays. People wouldn't, people just don't get it.
I mean, I love hyper specific, especially regional hyper specific callbacks, and there are some callbacks that have outlasted their like original time of relevance, so that people know the callback and have no idea what it's a reference to. It's kind of like Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
Like Bugs Bunny was a reference that everybody would have gotten at the time. Lots of things in Looney Tunes were references that were, pop culture references that everyone at the time would have understood. And now we just think of Bugs Bunny and we don't have any idea what the reference is.
Yeah,
it's kind of like how, particularly with Bugs Bunny, when he'd call somebody a Nimrod, he was being sarcastic. And now most people don't realize that Nimrod isn't a dunce, an idiot. It's actually the opposite in all actuality. So a lot of Rocky callbacks have kind of turned into, I'm saying these words and I don't 100% know why I'm saying them, but I love the way they sound.
The craziest thing with Looney Tunes, not to get too off track, but everyone must know this. Bugs Bunny is eating a carrot, and when he says "What's up, Doc," which is a reference to Cary Grant in a movie called, I want to say It Happened One Night. It could be a different Cary Grant movie. But anyway, he's eating a carrot in a particular scene, and it's a reference to that. Rabbits don't and actually can't eat carrots. So the whole reason we associate rabbits with carrots in our culture is because Bugs Bunny did it. It's not a thing rabbits really do.
So. Yeah, Clark Gable though. That was Clark Gable in It.
Oh my God, you're right. Yeah. Yes, thank you.
But it's okay because people don't know, like the Bugs Bunny character where they have this kind of a oafish character saying, "Which way did he go, George?" That's Lon Chaney Jr. in Of Mice and Men, and Burgess Meredith played George, and he was just this slow guy who would always say, "What are we doing, George? Where's the rabbits, George?" And that's but you don't have that reference to Lon Chaney Jr. anymore. It's been almost 80 years since that would be relevant.
That's also and I will love him and I will pet him and I will name him George.
Oh my gosh, that's right. Yeah.
Exactly. So, it's like there's so many things in here. I mean, I don't know when original audiences like my age were watching this and they're driving in the rain, and on the radio it's Richard Nixon giving his resignation speech, everybody recognized it at the time because it was almost a current event. And you're like, oh yeah, that's Nixon saying goodbye. But it's like nowadays, okay, that's somebody in the past that was doing something, or they might not even recognize it as Nixon.
Yeah, it's a great way that it kind of places the movie. Unquestionably, the movie has to have happened at least past a certain date, and we discussed it a lot when we were in that minute, but the timing doesn't line up because it's stated to be like a late November evening, so the speech couldn't have been live. And then there's all these other signs,
the newspapers from August,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And the badge on Brad's jacket implies a certain, so anyway, it's interesting, but
the badge implies it's from 1963, which it can't be.
So even though he is presumably a recent high school graduate, which our Friend of the show, Larry Wiesel, has already admonished us for trying to make sense of the time in the movie when they literally say time meant nothing in the movie. But
Yeah.
yeah, but it's interesting still to discuss. And what else are we doing in a minute by minute podcast if not discussing
Yeah.
these things?
Always looking for content, of course.
Exactly.
Well, I guess all of this is to say that it's really good that you're on for this minute because you can say whether or not it was great when it all began.
That's
It
true.
really was. It really, I mean, when I saw it in a theater in London in the West End, that floor show looks just like how the setup was. It had a big proscenium. They had ropes tied off with canvas bags over the walls, so it looked like they were undergoing renovation and then had given up. So when you're looking at the theater, it looks like the theater is going to collapse at any moment. It's just a very creaky looking theater. And you know, seeing the floor show, it really was like, I mean, they didn't have statues that came alive, but they mostly just froze in place and came out and sang these songs. And I mean, there's, you know, of course, and I'm sure you've gone over this before, that there's characters missing, there's characters that were combined. The one that's missing is that what I noticed the most is the usherette. And the usherette comes out with you know, it's a 1940s look. They have a tray in front of them that's on a kind of a belt that they're carrying, and they look like, you know, the cigarettes lady that you see in all the 40s movies. And she'd come around and open up with a science fiction double feature as she was walking up and down the aisle. And so, you know, they moved in and out of the audience, and it made it very personal. And I think that carries over to the movie version when you have people that are acting it out, you know, in front of an audience. And, you know, it's very very personable. You know, it's you felt like you were supposed to be participating in it. And of course his name just dropped out of my head, but the fellow that played Frankenfurter after Tim Curry in London, he was singing and he finished a song and somebody in the back of the theater yelled, "Love it!" And then they said, "I love you, babe." And you know, it was, and it got a big laugh. People were like, "Oh, that's cute." I wish someone had filmed that back then. It was something to see.
I recently found it was a bootlegged copy, or I guess a series of bootlegged videos of the floor show up through the kick line and Riff Raff and Magenta coming in to break everything up. And it was the original blocking, but from, I want to say it was 1980 when it was in Australia. And the person who posted this said that this was definitely the same choreography that they had for the original. This was just when it was on tour, and they had the final riffraff of the original tour, Perry Bedden, in, and Little Nell was still Columbia, but
Wow.
everybody else was different. And just watching the choreography, it was so cool. Like they were all on mics, like not even cordless. Like they had corded mics that they had to throw between each other, and it was just so neat to see.
Yeah, it was a very involved set, as I recall. The especially the hot patootie scene with where they switch out Dr. Scott. It was built with a series of ramps that was in the theater, and on top of the, like about halfway up, like on another floor, they had a Coca-Cola cooler, a large, you know, like a something you'd walk into an older grocery store, you know, a general store kind of a thing. They had a Coca-Cola cooler. And when Frank did away with Eddie, he shoved him into the cooler and slammed the lid shut, and there was a leg sticking out. And then Dr. Scott appeared, and it's like it's the same guy. But Eddie's leg is now being played by something made out of rubber and sticking. But they did it so quickly, you didn't notice the change. But it was an amazing bit of stagecraft in doing that. That he was there for the. It looked like he had been thrown in and, you know, locked up in this freezer.
That is amazing. I mean, we discussed that a little bit because in the commentary on the DVD, Patricia Quinn claims that none of the actors knew until the reveal that they were supposed to be eating Eddie. And we were like, that can't be true because it's in the show, right?
Yeah.
Her memory of the events is sometimes a little hazy, it seems. She also is super adamant that there is nothing inappropriate about her relationship with Riff Raff, and that it is not abnormal brother and sister relations, and she's aghast that anybody thinks it's incestuous, which so we
they just really like playing patty cake very slowly.
I mean, goodness,
very
great.
Roger Rabbit.
I don't know.
Roger Rabbit.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen the sort of sequel Shock Treatment, but
I was at the world premiere in in Austin. Yeah.
So you know that there is no room for doubt in Shock Treatment, at least.
No.
And they are brother and sister again in that movie.
Yeah. It's it was I wound up there by accident at it was at the Riverside Theater in Austin, and I lived just up the hill. And they had no advance warning about this, that it was going to premiere here. And I just happened to see they had a poster, in the front, the marquee there, and it just said from the makers of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's Richard O'Brien.
Yeah.
And they had a sizable crowd, mostly college age kids. And I think they were expecting another participation thing, because there were all those dead spots in it where you can shout back, but it just never clicked.
Yeah. I am a big Shock Treatment defender. I do love it, but I understand why it was not the hit that Rocky was. And it was obviously plagued by a lot of problems and writers' strikes and things like that. And
you can't really do it on purpose. I mean, Rocky Horror basically was lightning in a bottle. And when you try to manufacture that, I don't think it works. I live 30 miles away from Denton, Texas, and I thought they should have premiered it there. But I guess North Texas State University wasn't as big a film-centric place. But it's it was kind of sad. I mean, it was. I like the songs in it. I like Little Black Dress, and the title song was great.
That's something that is honestly pretty. Many people, I would even say most people I've spoken to in the community, agree that pound for pound, the music in Shock Treatment is even better than Rocky Horror a lot of the time. I would say Shock Treatment's worst song is so much better than the worst songs in Rocky.
Are we saying Carte Blanche versus?
Well, and I hardly even count Carte Blanche because it's barely in the movie. But yeah, I mean, even Carte Blanche versus, I don't know, what would you call the worst song in the movie? The Planet Schmanet is the one you hate? Yeah.
Yes. Yes, twice.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, but Rocky's best song can easily stand up. Although, I mean, they're Bitchin' in the Kitchen is such a great and fun song. There's a lot to recommend it in Shock Treatment. But anyway, yeah, we'll save that for our next podcast. But
speaking of this movie, though.
Yeah.
Kelly, what happens in this minute? Which minute are we on even?
We're on minute 78 of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. In this minute, we have just seen a gloved hand that we know to be Frank's start to pull the de-Medusa switch, and he continues. He finishes pulling the switch at the beginning of this minute, and we hear kind of a spacey bloop sound, and we see that Columbia is no longer a statue. She's back to her normal self. She is dressed. This is our first time we get to talk about the floor show costumes. So she's dressed in what is like a front-laced corset that hooks in the back, just a black corset that is sequined. Many people describe this as an hourglass or a stalactite and stalagmite formation, but it's basically triangular shapes kind of dripping down and then up the corset. It's a little sparser on the sides in various colors. Columbia's corset is the only one that does not tie at the bottom. Hers ties at the top. All of the others are tied at the bottom. And she's got a fingerless over the elbow black fishnet sleeve on the left arm, a red sequined over the elbow gauntlet on the right arm, which is edged with either faded red or pink feather trim, and it hooks over the middle finger with a white thread loop. Black satin underwear in bikini cut, roughly. Seamed up the back, black fishnet stockings, which also have a few sequins on them, easy to miss. And a black satin garter belt with crinkly red metallic straps and black patent high-heeled pumps. According to Ruth's Anal Retentive Rocky Horror, those are 5-inch heels, according to Barry Bostwick. So probably, and they do look about 5 inches, and that's very, very high. And then, of course, she's carrying a gigantic, probably about 9 feet is the estimate people have, red and black and yellow netting boa. Ruth calls it cheap synthetic fabric overlocked on the edges. Leandra and I have both seen this boa on a number of occasions, this specific one, because Larry Wiesel owns it and brings it with him everywhere he goes, as far as I know. Probably drives to his kids to school with it.
I've held it before.
I've held it before too. He is not shy about letting people.
It's like the Shroud of Turin for Rocky Horror. Yeah.
Yes.
He has a corset from the movie too, and he travels with the. But so yeah, we've both seen it. I don't know what fabric you think, Leandra, because you know more about that than me. Yeah, it seems like organza. Very, very interesting and very fun prop. I love these. Not to get too far off of my minute recap, but I had to go into the costumes because this is iconic. And of course, she's got white face paint with a purple like line drawn around the outside of her face, framing it, purple on the eyes, and then bright red lipstick. So she lifts her boa above her head with both hands and says, "It was great when it all began." And then she begins sort of dancing side to side, says, "I was a regular Frankie fan," kicking her legs. And then, "but it was over when he had the plan." She starts kind of shaking the boa out with her right arm to start a workin' on a muscle man. At this point, she starts walking across the stage and with each step kind of grinding the ball of her foot into the stage. And she says, "Now the only thing that gives me hope with some high kicks is my love of a certain dope." During this, she's facing away from the audience. She's dipping and looking over her shoulder and winking. And then she turns back towards the audience and says, "Rose tints my world and keeps me safe from the trouble and pain." And she is shimmying off stage while she does it, with both nipples quite exposed above the corset.
What?
I know. She must have been so embarrassed and shocked about this. Then the DeMedusa is pulled again, possibly the same shot, but not the exact same sound effect, I noticed. So I thought that was interesting. Now we see Rocky is DeMedusa'd. He is dressed exactly the same, except for, again, his corset is tied at the bottom instead of the top. And his makeup, where Columbia's was purple, his is blue. And he says, "I am just 7 hours old," throwing his arms up above his head and then walking forward, kind of throwing the boa with each step. And then he stops and poses and says, "Truly beautiful to behold." He spreads his boa wide and starts walking across the stage again, kind of pushing the boa out again with each step, saying, "And somebody should be told," pins the boa sort of to his hip, then says, "My libido hasn't been controlled," and he thrusts his hips 4 times and then dips. And then again, he's walking, pushing the boa. "Now the only thing I've come to trust is an orgasmic rush of lust." And that is the end of the minute.
What a family-friendly minute.
I know.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it is very good.
You unfortunately landed on one of the 3 times there are nipples in this movie. Or, well, no, 4.
Story of my life. Yeah.
3 separate nip slips from Columbia, and then there's one rock and roll porn magazine that has nipples on the front of it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. This was R when it was released, right?
It was.
Yeah.
It still is, even though by today's standards,
Yeah, this is kind of
PG-13.
Almost. Yeah. It's tame.
Yeah.
In relationship, and you think about the 80s. What passed for PG was quite a. Yeah. I know that, and I don't remember the name. I know that this is Rocky's dubbed by someone else. It's not his singing voice.
Trevor White. Yes.
Trevor White, Australian singer. Yeah, I guess because it isn't even Peter Hinwood in like the grunting, right? It's Trevor White throughout.
Correct.
There in the audience,
like 1 or 2 instances where it sounds like maybe he was able to keep like a whimper, but for the most part, it's Trevor White getting into the sound booth after this was over, going, "You know what? We need this to be not bad."
Does does Peter's version exist anywhere? Does anybody have a scratch track of that?
I can tell it doesn't exist. I don't even know that they recorded one. I think that they might have had him singing along like
Oh, yeah.
live,
Mhm.
just so that they could get the dubbing
Yeah.
on point. However, I don't think that they even got him to a studio because they were like, we know what your strengths are, and we know that it's not singing and it's not talking.
Yeah, I think this is a singing in the rain situation, or I like to imagine that he has like a really high-pitched voice.
Well, and
But
it's interesting because in the show, Rocky has not a lot of lines, but he does have some. One of the memorable ones is he asks Janet, "Is it true that you don't like men with so many muscles or too many muscles or whatever the line was?" And every time I watch the Rocky Horror Show, and I do watch it whenever I can, it's wild to me that this is a Rocky that speaks. The Rocky in the movie can't or won't.
Yeah, they need like a Peter Boyle reveal that he's suddenly articulate. And
yeah. Yeah, I wrote in my notes that he really gives male stripper in this, and like in a way that the others don't really with their performance. Like he really, the way he is interacting with the theoretical audience is so like an exotic dancer.
yeah, and he moves a lot slower than anybody else in the whole song, I think. He's kind of a slower strut.
Dancing was another thing that was not one of his strengths.
So
Although
if he
I will
can't
say,
sing or speak or dance, why is he in a musical?
yeah, I think we all know, and we talked about this long ago, but at least for the show, and I believe also in the case of Peter Henwood, they cast Rocky by literally going to gyms and just looking for beefcakes. That's actually also how they ran into Tim Curry and cast him, but they were there looking for guys who looked like hunks who could play Rocky. So
What an
Yeah,
awful
like,
assignment. Oh
I know,
no.
I know. Oh no, if I must. Yeah, I know. But yeah, the dancing is not his strength. But honestly, for the individual floor show routines, I think he is at least on beat. Other wonderful female actresses who are in this movie, but not this minute, their individual floor show routines are not on any semblance of a beat.
yeah,
So
no.
there's that.
They
Gosh,
didn't want them mouthing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2.
Exactly. Yeah, so he at least for this, he's at least staying on beat. I can
it's
give him
very
that.
mechanical. Somebody clearly worked with him as much as they possibly could.
Yeah.
This might have been take 7 or 8. So
Yeah.
Oh yeah. At least the costumes I also wanted to comment on, and in the commentary for this minute, Patricia Quinn was very appreciative of the floor show in general and especially the costumes, and then she said, I mean, this was before Michael Jackson, which I assume she meant because of the mismatched gloves. I'm not sure what else about the costume would have potentially been inspired by Michael Jackson. But anyway, Patricia Quinn was really enamored of the costumes. I am as well. I don't know if we covered the exact budget. I think we have talked about the exact budget, but the costume budget for the show originally was only $400, which adjusted for inflation, that's like 2,500, which is still not very much. And then for the entire movie, which is a movie, it was only 4 times that, 1,600 at the time. So costuming this entire movie with only $1,600 is crazy, and that's why there were a lot of people sewing on sequins themselves. But it's an inspired, if it's a little frustrating as a shadow caster because having to put sequins on everything is torturous, but the effect is great, isn't it?
oh yeah, it's stunning. It's
Yeah.
and the editing and the
I do
cinematography
like
is
the
great too.
progression. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking of originally, at least from all of the photos that I've seen of the original costuming, the women are in essentially bras or balconette sort of peekaboo tops, and the men are in corsets, but they're fairly loose. And these costumes were clearly put together with the understanding that there isn't a quick change in movies. And of course, obviously, Shadowcasters still need to do a quick change. Now we've got so much more.
Yeah. I mean, generally, and we talked about this a little bit last minute, but there is no time for this for this change, especially if you're Rocky, but I can hardly imagine
Yeah, I mean, somebody standing behind, behind the
Yeah.
stage with a corset ready to slide over fast, and um, I mean, I don't know if they can make a decal instead of a makeup, just getting all that on that quick.
Yeah, the makeup we generally don't have time to do in a shadow cast situation unless we are double casting, at least not the full makeup. Sometimes, if you're really lucky and really on your game, you can grab a colored lipstick or whatever and draw the circle around your face and stuff. And throw some red lipstick on. But in terms of doing the white face makeup, the only time I've ever seen that successfully done is when the floor show was different from the normal cast.
Yeah, that would make
Yeah.
sense. Just stand-ins.
Yeah. Well, that's how we did it for our most recent Halloween show because it was a really big show and we wanted to involve as many people as possible. But it gives a really great effect when everybody can be in full makeup.
I know this is not my minute, but just an upcoming minute when Riff Raff and his sister come in through the doors, Frankenfurter, it's all over. In something that I remember starkly from the West End was it's just like in the movie that you have these two giant Fresnel lenses out in the lobby that turn on, and it shines through the whole theater, and it makes everybody in the theater turn around to see what's going on. And it's quite an effect
That's amazing.
when it was done on the original in the original play. I do. That's one of the bigger memories I have of what's and seeing it on the screen. It's very similar to what was going on in the theater.
Do you remember what the takeover costumes were like? Are they similar to?
They really were Flash Gordon-y, and the Bride of Frankenstein wig.
Yeah.
It was a lot like that. I don't recall Riff Raff having. He had washed out hair, but he wasn't as bald as Richard O'Brien, and really powerful voice. He did do a great. It was everybody like I know I'm doing this on the camera, but it's everybody like, what is that? And you hear it behind you and turn around and there's all this light and you're trying to make out who it is because it's a very bright light, and it's like oh and they're wearing those spacesuit things. So but it was very very impressive or not on stage, but up the. It was very impressive up the aisle.
So cool.
If you've ever seen The Lion King when they have the opening when the animals all come out, that was the kind of a feeling. It's like look at this.
Yeah, that is so cool. I can only imagine. And yeah, the spacesuits, even in a shadow cast situation, they blow people away. So I can only imagine what it was like in that kind of environment.
It was very shiny vinyl. And it was just, and the light reflecting off of it and everything, and you weren't expecting it at all when it happened because you were watching the floor show, and then all of a sudden this thing comes on behind you.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was neat. It was really neat.
Talking of future minutes, as a man of science, would you like to comment on this movie's interpretation of a laser?
Well, I mean, I've had laser surgery, and I know that they can zap things. Just not, I don't know if it can zap at that diameter.
Well, the specific words were a device which is capable of emitting a beam of pure antimatter. Which I'm like,
okay, we don't have antimatter lasers yet. But,
yeah, I know. It's like I've always been like, why call it a laser if it's going to be a completely made up device? But it's so fun and so goofy.
Well, I mean, from after seeing the movie, every time I put a record on the phonograph, I always called the record player a sonic transducer, which is exactly what it is.
That's true. Yeah, a device which is capable. That's so funny. So yeah, I mean, Leandra, do you have other notes for this minute? I'm a little sparse, to be honest, because it's just some dancing.
Just a few, mostly like my experiences with the costuming. The kids these days, they don't understand how good they have it with getting costumes together.
Oh yeah, I can hardly imagine.
I remember when I started shadow casting, really the one and only option you had for a corset that had kind of the right shape that was going to be fairly reasonably priced. And by reasonably priced, I meant like maybe $50, which was still a lot, particularly for me. I was a child. You had to go to Fredericks of Hollywood and get the dream corset was the style. And that was considered just like everybody's favorite choice. It was the go-to, and it didn't really look 100% accurate, but it was black and it did have laces, and it wasn't at a sex shop, so it wasn't like weird and made of like vinyl or anything. Now you can just go online and get one, and it's probably better than the Dream Corset, and it's certainly cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably like Spirit Halloween probably carries things by now that every it's like, what character do you want? What the yeah, and I would imagine that that's the default setting now for, I would think, a lot of live shows, at least with this generation.
Yeah.
Maybe not the bagged costumes, because Fox released a series of like commercially approved
Oh dear.
costumes that are all just really bad. They're so weird and not accurate to the film and just kind of embarrassing to put on if you're used to something that like somebody has spent 100 hours hand sewing, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's cosplay has become tragic in many cases because there's so many options, and you're like, why did you come here with this when you could have sat home and learned to craft? I guess it depends on the venue. I go to an unusual amount of Rocky Horror shows with my daughter over the years, and we went to one in Worcester, Massachusetts, and it was, I can't describe it, but they were the worst costumes I've ever seen. And I had the feeling that the people that were involved in it had listened to the album but never saw the movie, if that makes any sense. It's like, do you understand what this is supposed to be and what you're doing? I mean, it's okay to have a free interpretation of the songs, but if you don't understand what you're acting to on the screen, you shouldn't really sit in the audience, learn it, and then go up. But there's many variations, and you have to say fandom is what you make of it. We were at one in, my daughter at the time was 14, and she wanted to go see a Rocky Horror show that didn't involve the movie. They were going to act out Rocky Horror, but they were going to act out the movie with songs from the show, but it wasn't going to be Rocky Horror, the Rocky Horror show. It was going to be selections from. And I went, and I'm an old guy with a 14-year-old daughter who wanted to go to the thing, and she was dressed up in a French maid's outfit. Yeah, and she had the white makeup and all that. So we went, and I think they thought that I had never seen the show. And the guy that was playing Rocky, who jumped in and out of a couple of different songs, which I couldn't understand, you're supposed to pull out a ticket, and they were going to call up people in the audience to do something to do with Rocky Horror. And he came, I don't exactly remember the circumstances, but he wanted me to come up with him to sing a song, and he was going to give me the lyrics. And they had pulled my ticket, so I was up to sing a song, and he handed me a lyric sheet I don't even remember which song it was. He handed me a lyric sheet, and of course he's wearing a gold bikini. And as we're going up, he's leaning over. He goes, "I'm really sorry about this. I hope you're not embarrassed." I said, "Dude, I've been to the show like 150 times. I know I've probably seen it more times than you have." But it's just interesting to see how people relate to the show, relate to the movie, relate to the costumes, relate to the characters. And again, it's what you can make of it. The only thing that bothers me at times is if people aren't earnest about it. If you want to do it as best you can. Don't do it half-heartedly.
For sure. And I will say that some of the best performances that I've ever seen at a shadow cast have been with people wearing just the worst costumes ever. Because if you can just have the right attitude about it, you can be wearing a burlap sack and still look amazing.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like this is a veiled comment about me, but that's okay.
To be fair, that time that you wore that absolutely awful costume, it's because we both forgot your costume, and we were in Kentucky, like 12 hours away from our costume. So on the way to the venue, we went to the thrift store, and I just sewed some things backstage for you. And you still looked great, but it was an awful costume.
It was not that bad. I was not the worst dressed person at that show.
I have to tell you, I would totally watch your Netflix miniseries.
It was fantastic. Kelly was like, "Hey, you have this dress, right?" I'm like, "No."
Oh my god.
Why would I?
And like
she's
we were
"Oh,
like
no."
supposed to be at the theater already, and we were like, well, I guess we're stopping at Goodwill. And thankfully we're both on Wellbutrin, so we were just fine with it.
Yeah, I mean, Salvation Army is the greatest costume store in the world. Everybody knows that. You know?
Oh, for sure. Oh, and then last year, like maybe a couple of months ago, Kelly and I went up to Long Island for a show, and I was already on the road when they asked if I could go into Magenta, and I was like, I'm in the middle of moving. Even if I could, I don't have any of my costumes, so I'm gonna have to figure out something. I definitely don't have a wig. And I showed up and I was kind of like the goth teenager version of Magenta, I'd say. It was a look that Kelly thought was incredibly attractive because she's gay, but I wouldn't say that it was a Magenta look.
No, it was cute. But yeah, I agree. It was, oh man, that was, but I mean, considering the notice you had, I think you pulled it together beautifully. Not like me, who just forgot my costume in Maysville.
Wow.
That was so fun though.
It was fun.
And that's what it's about. Even the stressful times are some of the best times you can remember. It's good.
Although, kind of recently, I needed to kill an hour or two, and I went to a dollar store, and even dollar stores are better than they used to be. I was just wandering around taking pictures of things that were incredibly good for Rocky Horror costuming, and just going, oh, if only they had pink gingham. Oh, guess they do. Oh, if they only had a sequined pink bow tie for Columbia. Wow, they do. Certainly they wouldn't have back-seamed thigh-high fishnets at dollar stores. Oh, they do. And it was murdering Kelly.
It was. Well, I mean, the bow tie, really? Like, I know you can get, for example, the pink Frank gloves there. That's easy, but my God, yeah.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, so that's my counter to anyone on our cast who says that they can't afford their costumes. You can do a decently good job at the dollar store.
Yeah, and if you know how to sew, like I have a sewing machine, but I'm afraid of it, but I can hand sew. And because of that, I'm able to make sure that I always have clothes on my body at a Rocky showing. And that makes me kind of an outlier for some people.
And I can't sew, but I made friends with Leandra, so
there you go.
I'm gay, so that works.
Yep, exactly.
And I mean, the costume only has to hold together for 2 hours and 10 minutes. So you're
it's true.
Exactly.
Wow.
I know.
Well, I'm really glad after all these years that it's still alive and still, every generation has their own take on Rocky Horror. That makes me happy because I remember many good times with this movie, with the play, with the with just listening to the music and talking about the characters and stuff, and listening to how all the responses change over the years. When I was cleaning out the theater, everybody had a Bic lighter and a copy of the New York Times over their head.
I wish they still let us do lighters, obviously, for very good reason. We can't have those in the theater anymore, but
yeah. Well, I used back in the day. This is how how long ago it was when Cards for Sorrow, Cards for Pain. I lived near a large IBM plant. And Cards for Sorrow, Cards for Pain, when we cleaned them up, they were a mixture of playing cards, but they were mostly IBM punch cards.
Oh my gosh, that's so fun.
Yeah, so it's
those are really Cards for Sorrow and Cards for Pain,
especially if you got hit in the head with a deck of them. It's just a different time. I mean, water pistols and all kinds of stuff when I went to Alamo, I don't think they would allow water pistols there.
Yeah, we don't allow our theater doesn't allow, most theaters these days don't allow the audience to use water, but we as the cast make sure that people get
okay. Yeah.
we run around with spray bottles, so we take care of that and throw cups of water on them and stuff. But
we are in the age of the super soaker, so I guess things had to change, but it was all homegrown, and as dangerous as it may have been, it was just a chance to rebel for a couple of hours at night and make a mess.
Like I said, I understand why we can't do open flames, although we do openly flame, but I understand why we can't, but man, the effect is different. Same with concerts, I get it, but it's different than a phone flashlight.
Everything gets Disneyfied eventually. And I grew up with Chopsaki movies in old theaters and people screaming, but it's like, That'll come back someday. People
Hopefully.
figure out how to make a fireproof, waterproof theater. Then it'll happen.
Well, what else did you have, Leandra?
Honestly, not a whole lot. I have a couple of other notes about costuming, but let me put those aside for a later minute just because I'm gonna
Cool.
run out of things to say very fast.
Well, Jim, did you have anything else to talk about this minute or just the movie in general?
No, really, I'm glad it was there at the time, and back when it was dangerous. But you can still bring a little danger into it every time. I mean, if you're pulling out a sharp needle while you're sewing up clothes, there's some danger.
We have cast members go to the hospital all the time.
Okay, so the spirit's still alive. There you go.
Yeah, I know of at least one person who died doing Rocky. So,
oh my
Wow.
God.
yeah, keep in mind that people who play Eddie are often heavier people.
Yeah.
And they often will do a lot of running around a theater, which is not necessarily a thing that they typically do. So I know of one person who had a heart attack
Oh yeah,
because
that's
of
right.
that.
Wow.
Was
Well,
it
be
like
careful.
one of those situations where the audience thought it was part of the show and then it was like, no,
They had their heart attack like off stage.
Oh, okay.
So I'm sure that they noticed the ambulances, but
yeah.
I don't think that it was like he dropped dead on stage sort of thing.
Okay, that's less dramatic, but I suppose so much the better. Although if I were to die doing Rocky, I would at least want it to be on stage during my moment so that
Oh, you will.
With a funeral on a giant dining room table. Yeah.
and then I would want the cast to consume my flesh live on stage.
There you go.
No.
Oh, come on.
Next up is callbacks, though, right?
Yes. Jim, do you happen to know any for this minute?
Well, I mean, we do have a callback from that we're de-Medusaizing them. So that was a callback to the Medusa. So you're remembering, oh yeah, that's why they're statues. It's like, and what do they call it? It's a Medusa. So you're unmedusaing them. And that makes, I guess that would be a significant callback.
Yeah, for sure. I don't have too many for this minute. I bet Leandra has a lot. But when Columbia says it was great when it all began, frequently people will say, but now it sucks. When she references a certain dope, there's many ways that people will relate that to marijuana or other drugs. Before she turns around and starts shimmying, show us your rose tits is what people will yell. And then she rose tints our world. When Rocky says truly beautiful to behold, people will say modest too. And then the very last one I have is the only thing I've come to trust is Janet's bust.
Yeah, I misunderstood when you were asking me. I was saying, oh, the callbacks of, yeah, sorry. Yes, I do remember the bust one.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
It's been a while.
No worries. Yeah, I mean, that's just, it is a strange thing to call it, but yeah, it's the term for the things people are yelling in the movie.
Yes.
But yeah, that's all I got.
Now that you understand the prompt, Jim.
Yes, I'm sorry. Grandpa's a little slow. I'm trying
Don't
to remember.
Talk about Leandra that way.
Yeah.
Hey. Okay.
I'm trying to remember from that part. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm drawing a blank. It's been been too many years, but I'm sure there was something clever.
It's not a wonderful minute for callbacks, really. But yeah, Leandra.
So I do have quite a few.
Okay, well, I take it back.
First off, when you see Columbia raise her boa in the air for that first beat, you can scream Mortal Kombat, which I think is fun.
80s reference. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then there are two different options for things to say along with Columbia's bit. It was great when it all began, and now it sucks. I was a regular Frankie fan. The fan sucks. And it was over when he had the plan. The plan sucks. To start working on a muscle man. The man sucks. So I like that one a lot. But the one that I hear more at our show is I was a certified lesbian. How do you get certified? I had to take an oral exam and start a douching with spick and span.
Oh dear.
Jesus Christ.
Now the only thing that gives me hope is smoking pot and my fantasy of fucking the Pope.
Oh my god.
Oh boy.
Rose-colored nipples is why this movie's rated R. And then it's, I am just 7 hours old and can't dance, truly beautiful to behold and modest too. And somebody should be told I can't sing. And then every time he flicks the boa, you go, woo, 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 woo. Like very Ric Flair. I don't know what else to say about that. And then when he puts the boa between his legs on that very last line of the minute, you say orgasmic rush of lust and anal floss.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that these are callbacks that I inherently enjoy. I do love the woos. Anytime I can Ric Flair is important to me. But the rest of these are fine.
I do like that. Yeah, he can't dance, can't sing. That I do like those.
He truly can't.
Yeah.
But that's really all I got.
Well then, I guess it's time for us to send Jim to his fate, whatever that may be. Certainly not death by Perry Bidden.
It better be good. I died the last time.
And sign off the way we sign off every minute.
With
now. You
You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
So
now get the fuck out.
To the late night double feature picture show.